when a wild horse found himself stuck in deep and treacherous mud. It seemed as if his life was over. Luckily, thanks to a man's kindness and ingenuity, the animal survived. But how the horse thanked him is the most amazing and unbelievable thing of all. Daryl Glover loved to work with his hands and enjoyed being in and amongst the natural environment. Though he worked in a factory during the day, he liked coming home and spending his time in the yard or walking through the forests and plains not far from his home. He liked to feel connected to the earth and the environment, and he would spend hours on end outside, working with his hands, carving, creating, tending to his plants and crops, and talking to beautiful wild horses that would occasionally pass through his land. One day, Daryl decided that he needed some new garden furniture. Instead of heading to the store to buy something pre-made, he wanted to make his own. There was, after all, something immensely rewarding about creating something for yourself. But first, he would need wood. So he grabbed a saw, a few cutters and ropes, and threw them into the back of his truck before heading out to the forest. He would try to find an old fallen tree to work with. Failing that, he would have to cut one down. Though Daryl by far preferred the idea of not damaging a healthy and living tree if he could help it. Parking up on the outskirts of the trees, Daryl jumped out of his truck and set off towards the trees. There were tens of thousands of trees to choose from, maybe hundreds of thousands. So, he knew that he would be spoiled for choice. But as he reached the first tree and looked upwards, studying the canopy above, he heard a strange and unexpected distant noise. It sounded like a horse, but not the kind he had ever heard before. This one sounded distressed, in pain, and worried. While he would normally have shrugged the noise off, something about it tugged at Daryl's heartstrings. Immediately forgetting about his hand for the perfect tree to build his garden furniture with, he set off searching for the strange and unusual sound. Little did he know what kind of heartbreaking sight he would soon encounter. A short way away from where Daryl had parked his truck was a large, boggy section of land. The ground had become wet and saturated due to rain and groundwater, and the dirt had transformed into thick, gloppy mud. It sat in large, deep pools, and unsuspecting passers often found themselves stepping directly into the mud bog, having to strain to pull themselves back out again. It was an annoyance for a human, but it could spell disaster for an animal. A large wild horse had been cantering past the outskirts of the forest when he found that he had run straight into one of these bogs. At first, he tried to simply step out, but it soon became evident that the horse was sinking under his own body weight. As he sank lower and mud crept up his body, the horse started to panic and struggled to free himself. But of course, he just sank deeper. His front legs remained on the shore, but the issue was that his powerful hind legs were being held tightly by the mud. Since the majority of a horse's power comes from those mighty hind legs, he could only flail uselessly. For hours, the horse fought to pull himself from the bog, and at times it even looked like he would manage. But eventually, he would only slip back down into the mud again. Unfortunately, the beautiful wild horse was becoming tired. With very few people in the area and night only a few hours away, it seemed like the horse would be stuck there forever, dying slowly from starvation and exhaustion. The horse laid still, breathing heavily for long stretches. It was all he could do to plaintively cry and call out, hoping for assistance. His sad neigh rang out through the forest, but with no one around but the trees to hear, it seemed as if he would never be free. Every now and then, he would make a large token effort to try to free himself, but he had neither strength nor energy left in him. But suddenly, around the edge of the forest, walked a concerned-looking man. It was Daryl. He saw the horse in the distance and hurried over, assessing the situation. He didn't want to see the beautiful animal die, so he ran back to his truck and grabbed a rope, hoping to lasso the horse and pull him free. But of course, horses weigh many times more than an average man, and no matter how hard Daryl pulled and struggled, the horse didn't budge an inch. Thinking fast, Daryl fed the horse a few scraps of food he had in his truck, as well as some nearby grass. before quickly driving off toward town. If the horse were to get free, it would take more than just one man. After 45 minutes, the truck came roaring back towards the forest, this time with many members of Daryl's family inside too. Hopefully more hands and stronger people would make the rescue easier. On the back of the truck were 2 off-road vehicles. Perhaps these would help pull the horse from their deep, muddy bog. Soon enough, they had located the still-trapped animal and formed a plan. They would loop straps around his front legs and pull with the off-road vehicles. Hopefully, this would be enough to budge the horse. But there were no guarantees. No one was sure if the rescue mission would even work. But the small crew soon got down to business, looping straps around the horse, who sadly and calmly watched on. The horse didn't have enough energy to struggle, and it seemed as if he understood the men were there to help. The off-road vehicles began to pull softly at first, and then harder. If the horse showed that he was in any kind of pain, they were ready to stop. But the horse showed no sign of discomfort, seemingly more concerned about getting free than anything else. It took several tries, but soon the horse started to shift. Daryl saw this as a positive sign, but realized they still had a long way to go. So he hopped off his vehicle and repositioned the strap, this time around the horse's rear. He ensured it was secure and wouldn't slip off before climbing back on the vehicle and starting to pull. And miraculously, inch by inch, the horse began to rise up from the bog. Seemingly aware he was starting to become free, he resumed his efforts to get out, kicking his legs and pushing with all his might, when suddenly he slipped free. The horse finally stood proud, dripping with mud. Daryl and his team removed the straps from the horse and scooped some of the cold, wet, heavy mud from his body. They were congratulating themselves on a job well done when the newly reborn horse did something truly beautiful and unexpected. The horse turned and slowly approached Daryl. He lowered his huge head, looked him in the eye, and bowed as if to thank the man for his kindness. Daryl didn't know what to do or say. He simply reached out and stroked the mighty animal's nose. It was as if the man and animal had connected, and the two shared a beautiful and unspoken moment. Daryl even found himself on the edge of crying and felt a tight, proud feeling in his chest. As he lowered his hand, the horse reared up on his hind legs and let out a mighty neigh before turning towards the wide open grassy plains and galloping away, undoubtedly towards his worried family. Daryl turned to the small team and congratulated them on a job well done. But all the while, he had tears in his eyes, for he understood that if it weren't for him, the poor wild horse would have died. The horse couldn't thank him, nor could he repay him. Yet, somehow, Daryl understood how much the act of kindness had meant to him. For this act of kindness had saved the mighty horse from certain death and avoided tragedy. The animal would be able to live, raise his family, and bring joy and beauty to the world. And Daryl couldn't be prouder of himself.